Welcome back, adventurers, once again to Let's Play Chaos Head. In the last episode, Takumi's 3-hour session of sleep had ended, and it was basically, although Hazuki diagnosed him as not immediately having somnambulism, that is a very hard word to say, by the way, that isn't really an indication that he doesn't have it in the future or anything. But before he departed the hospital, she told him that he needed to get some medicine, which turned out to be fairly weak tranquilizers, although I don't really trust um, that statement myself, to help him sleep easier. But Takumi was also given a really strange questionnaire that yeah, some of the questions had absolutely nothing to do with Takumi Nishijo, um, but at least one or two of them had something to do with him more than we would care to admit, which is incredibly bizarre. And interestingly enough, once Takumi got back into the heart of Shibuya, there were lots of people, both men and women, handing out tissue packets and flyers um, that were basically pamphlets for type B blood donations, because apparently there is a shortage of type B blood donors in Shibuya right about now, which is rather strange. But in any event, Takumi is once again delving into the memories locked away in his subconscious and remembering the days when my mother took me to hospital each week, or every week. I kept my mouth shut at all times and indicated where my will lay by slowly nodding and shaking my head. And I should probably turn off Discord, because that's ultimately going to be a huge problem for me. So just bear with me a moment. There we go. I keep forgetting the notifications keep interrupting the episodes, which is fairly annoying, but that's the end of that distraction for the moment. At first they looked at me at a regular examining room, but when I showed no signs of getting better, they eventually started taking me to another room inside the general hospital. It was what you'd call a counseling room, with a sofa and lots of stuffed animals lying around. A space with one goal: to make patients relax. Now, come to think of it, in the last episode, Takumi actually mentioned that he had actually seen a similar kind of questionnaire beforehand, which is why he's going through this recollection right now. Without blaming anyone, Dr. Takashina persevered in trying to treat me. He was the only one who noticed that it wasn't that I couldn't speak, it was simply that I chose not to. Now, why did none of the other physicians notice that? That is a very interesting question. My mother talked to me about all kinds of things in a falsely bright voice. Dr. Takashina also always greeted me with a refreshing smile. The nurses were nice to me too, and
Hmm?
there appears to be something else. And I had the feeling there had always been one more person in the room. Right. He wore a solid black suit, which was very odd since we were in a hospital. Yeah, the suspicious looking man in the background behind the other staff members. Yeah, that man is incredibly suspicious and very much out of place at a hospital. He was always silent, like me, and I'd never even heard his voice. In the end, I couldn't find out anything about him. His behavior and atmosphere wasn't like a hospital physician, and he always stood off by himself, gazing out the window, as if he were there for some other purpose. I'd internally called him Nozomi-san, not because he said it was his name.
のぞみ
Now there is a very familiar name. The suit-clad man always wore a small badge on his chest, and as I was about to mention, we've seen the name Nozomi before, quite recently in fact. The word Nozomi was inscribed there, but since it had the design of a logo, it couldn't have been his name tag. I wonder if Nozomi is a corporation or some sort of organization. Right. Nozomi had also been printed on the check sheet. And apologies for not reading that, but that's out of my hands, adventurers. That automatically jumped ship from there. That aside, what was this Nozomi? The only certainty was that it must be the name of a corporation, given the man's attire. But yeah, we saw that Nozomi logo on the lower right corner of the check sheet, which means that somehow whatever Nozomi is, it certainly has ties to this particular hospital in general, given the fact that it's a general hospital. But this, that aside, this is actually the first time that we've seen or heard of anything relating to Nozomi.
のぞみさんっていう美人女社長が設立したカウンターテロ組織とか漫画みたいだ
Now there is a fanciful delusion if ever I saw one there, Takumi. But something tells me that that's not Nozomi's backstory in the slightest. But in any event, we're back at the base, yet again. Time to do some more searching. When I got back to my base, I immediately ran an online search for Nozomi, but a ton of results came out and I had no way to narrow them down to one. Maybe if we tried Nozomi Corporation, but then again, there might be a lot of those. Well, thinking about it normally, Nozomi-san could be the employee who had made the aforementioned checklist, or maybe a salesman who had come along to the hospital with his wares, that kind of thing. But I'm willing to bet that it's an organization, a large conglomerate, rather than a single person. And lately they've finally started to make use of his stuff, including the sheet they had me fill out today. Now, the chances of that were pretty damn slim. I'd never heard of them letting an outsider like that sit in on a patient's session. And yet, for whatever reason or rather, that they did exactly just that. Which is curious. In the end, who or what had Nozomi-san been? I got fed up once again at the emergence of these nagging memories. Something tells me, Takumi, that those nagging memories are going to be very crucial indeed, especially in the days to come. Whatever the case, I had identified the source of my deja vu. Next week I decided I would consult with Dr. Takashina about my memory issue. After seeing him, I'd shut myself up again and stop going to school. Well, we could always talk to him beforehand. Even though he's busy, we can still probably field a phone call. I couldn't go to school. Not when there was full of people trying to hurt me. Truthfully, I didn't really want to get my minimum attendance shift chart too messed up, but it wasn't worth dying for. And of course, going back to Suume Academy means that we are inevitably going to be crossing the paths of Yuaku Sanoki once again. I stopped running searches about Nozomi and began browsing for interesting-looking threads on Ad Channel. The news board consisted almost entirely of new gen related stuff, because of course it does. I completely lost my patience when even the Ensue board turned out to have threads like, "Let's try reenacting the new gen murders in Ensue." Yeah. I gave up on internet forums a long time ago, and I have never looked back. Grim was there when I went to wallow in Ensue. Well, I suppose Grim is kind of like Tom, in a sense. He's always there. So people have picked up on the fact that the alleyway incident is the third new gen incident. I flinched as the dim eyes of the girl I'd spotted at the scene of the staking murder grazed my brain. I didn't want to keep remembering it like this, but the second I let my guard down, the ominous memories came flooding back. Yeah, I'd seen the criminal's face. I knew who she was. Should I have reported her to the police? But I didn't want to get caught up in it. Unfortunately, you have no choice in the matter, especially where Ewer is concerned. Seems like Grimm is unusually interested in the new gen murders. And even Neidhart agrees. Guess seriously? That meant I wouldn't be able to jump in on the conversation when we were all chatting. But of course, in usual fashion, new gen has pretty much dissolved into social media gossip. To be fair, I had mistaken the staked up body for an object dart, so if I were forced to put it one way or the other, then yeah, maybe it did have artistic qualities, very morbid artistic qualities at that. And apparently Grimm is into S&M Guru. Fantastic. I don't want to see it, because it's terrifying. Also because you was looking at the new Gen Wiki herself back at Act Cafe. I wanted to escape the reality that I'd witnessed the scene of the crime. With that one goal in mind, I'd gone on blocking out every piece of new gen related news. Yet for some reason, it's all anyone in Shibuya ever wants to talk about. By doing so, I'd hoped to convince myself that the gruesome spectacle I'd seen had been an illusion, but in Ensue, I was on the same level as a god. It wasn't it wasn't enough merely to be strong. I also had to know about anything and everything. To say nothing of the fact that I was the closest thing our guild had to a leader. As the person in charge of getting everyone organized, it'd be way too humiliating if I couldn't keep up with their conversations. So in other words, we're pretty much caught in a trap. I had to avoid that. I headed over to the wiki Grim had told me about. The title New Gen Wiki was displayed in huge letters on the homepage. Compilation sites like this are an example of a type of wiki, where an indeterminate number of people post news and information about a specific topic. A new gen wiki like this was bound to be fairly fast moving, with all kinds of people posting stuff related to the new gen cases. Untrustworthy information and flaming were mixed in, but it was convenient because of how easy it made it to understand the big picture. There were a lot of links pasted in too. I started reading one called A Timeline Up to the Present. My heart started beating faster. I was nervous, even though all I was doing was reading a website. The palms of my hands were soaked in sweat. In the first incident, commonly known as the group dive, 5 co-ed high schoolers committed suicide together. 7th of September, approximately a month, no, anyway, approximately a month ago, in the middle of the night, at Shibuya's Cornelius Tower, they leapt from the heliport on top of the building and died instantly. Autopsies revealed that each of them had scratch marks and foreign bits of flesh under their fingernails. It was then theorized that they'd been holding each other's hands when they jumped off. There was nothing resembling a will or a suicide note left behind on the roof. By going to Cornelius Tower in person, an online personality known as Snake, really, discovered that only employees were given access to the rooftop, and that the door leading there was practically always bolted shut. Naturally, it was also locked from the time of the incident. The key to the roof had not been found among any of the 5 victims' belongings, and yet somehow they were all up there on the roof. In short, circumstances suggested that the rooftop heliport had been sealed to entry, and it remained completely unclear as to how the 5 students had gotten in. There was a high possibility that someone aside from those 5 had been present at the time of the incident. That is a very real possibility, but it'd be hard to prove. The second case, commonly known as the pregnant man, occurred this September, this time the 19th, 12 days after the first case. Early in the morning, a college student going home after karaoke. Yes, I know it's supposed to be karaoke, but karaoke is fine. Sighted a blood-drenched male corpse in the area near the underside of the Shibuya Station overpass. The man, Kanoe or Chizuo Kanoe, 21, was enrolled in a Shibuya area college, and though he had already died by the time his body was discovered, his abdomen had become unnaturally swollen. According to the autopsy, someone had cut open his abdomen, shoved a newborn fetus into his stomach, and sewn him back together. A DNA analysis established the fact that the victim and the fetus were not blood relatives. The victim was unmarried and had not been carrying on any relationships with a woman. Online speculation believed that since the fetus had been approximately 32 weeks old, it had been removed from its mother's body via C-section. That's particularly gruesome. But no one knew who the mother was, whether she could be found or what she was doing at present, or even whether she was alive or dead. Perhaps the police had tracked down her whereabouts, but at the very least they hadn't announced it to the public. That's two of the murders. On the verge of vomiting, I turned my eyes away from the monitor. How revolting. The perpetrator had to be insane. And on top of all that, to think that this vicious murder, which is murder number 3, might have been committed by that girl. Japan is over, emoji. I stared at Serotan to help my eyes recover. Somehow, I managed to stabilize my mental state. I thought about taking the medicine Dr. Takashina had given me, but it looked like I could still succeed in getting by with just Serotan, for the moment. But it was tough to have to read stuff this guru, even for the sake of preserving my reputation as Neidhart. It seems that Takumi has jumped straight into a delusion all of his own accord.
タッキーがド M ってんなら別に止めないけど、辛そうなタッキーは見てられないさ。もうやめよ。いつもみたく私にハーハーしてもいいからさ。
Serotan was so kind to me. Serotan was the only one who would stay as my ally, as expected, since he was my wife. Very strange logic. I rested my chin in my hand and took deep breaths as I gazed at Serotan's smile. I could feel her healing me. If I kept an eye on Serotan as I read, maybe I might be able to hold out a little longer. I decided to put this into practice without delay. Whether or not it actually works is another matter entirely, but oh well. For starters, why had 2 cases without any common features whatsoever been collectively labeled New Gen and treated like the same thing? Yet another mystery that requires solving. The group dive had been initially treated solely as if the victims had committed suicide. After the pregnant man incident, however, people online reinvestigated the group dive, and once they discovered the unnatural circumstances surrounding it, maybe they were killed in such a way so as to make it look like suicide, began to spread around as a new explanation. The parents and close friends of the 5 who died in the group dive kept saying there was no way they would have ever committed suicide. At this point, the mass media began seizing on the fact that both cases had occurred in Shibuya and began using new generation madness in their sensationalistic headlines, which is said to be how all got started in the first place. And then the third incident, the one I had witnessed, commonly known as the staking homicide. Since few days have passed since the case opened, the Wiki site didn't contain a lot of information on it just yet. All that had been made public was that the victim was Ota Hisashi, a 56-year-old college professor, and that the murderer used stakes to pin his corpse to the concrete wall of an abandoned house. And as far as Yua Kusunogi is concerned, that murderer is Takumi Nishijo himself, an accusation that he is definitely desperate to refute and clear at all costs. Residents of the neighborhood where the crime took place reported hearing a sound like someone hammering, starting around at 8 p.m., the time for when the murder was estimated to have been committed and lasting for over an hour. I'd heard it as well. It had clung to my ears, a nasty sound, a very ringing metallic sound there. On a side note, no connection between it and the group dive or the pregnant man had been uncovered yet. However, since it was the third bizarre incident to happen in the very same Shibuya, people naturally started treating the staking murder case as part of the new gen phenomenon. The police and the media viewed three cases as having been the work of different people, so why are they being lumped together collectively? But according to online commentary, or more properly online expectations, them having been committed by the same criminal or by the same group of people was the most popular explanation. It seemed like a lot of places online also gave it occult explanations, and some believed that everything stemmed back to the earthquake 2 months earlier, sorry. 2 months ago, a magnitude 3.0 earthquake had occurred, with Shibuya at its center. 8 people died, despite the fact that it had been a relatively small-scale event, and as a result it had become a big topic of conversation. Now they mentioned it, true enough, the new gen cases had begun after that earthquake. Thus, the people who supported an occult explanation for New Gen argued that the 8 deaths from the earthquake should be counted as the first New Gen incident, and this is probably going to start a flame war all across the landscape of that channel, which led to fierce debates between them and those who supported the most popular explanation, the same criminal theory. Hard to believe that the same person would be responsible for a variety of different incidents. It's not entirely impossible, but it is very far-fetched. In any case, the truly abnormal part of it was that though 3 brutal crimes had occurred in succession, no clues as to the perpetrator's identity had been discovered in any of them. True enough. And many online voices were eager for a 4th incident to take place, so that the killer might finally be caught? Or do they truly want the new gen madness to continue unabated? If I hadn't been involved, I would doubtless have joined in on the festival, and maybe I would have been waiting with bated breath for a 4th case. Damn it, those bastards sure have it easy. Indeed they do.
犯人を早く捕まえてくれよ。
Over a week had passed since the staking, but neither that demon girl nor the police had shown any signs of movement. If they were aware that I'd been in the area, surely the police would have at least come to question me, but at the moment they didn't seem to be doing anything about it. Although, if they were tipped off by Yua, that circumstance could ultimately change in a big hurry. Thank goodness. Looks like I'm not going to get dragged into it. I wouldn't be so sure of that. Yeah.
あなたには予知能力がありますか？
The words Yua thrust at me passed through my head.
予知能力があるって思わなきゃ納得できないような画像データをあなたが持っていたから。
I've been feeling reassured, but 1 second was all it took to send me right back into my gloom. The image Shogun had transmitted to me. Even now it lingered inside my PC as data. What Yua had told me was just the product of her own delusions. It was too incoherent to hold together logically, and yet logic has pretty much been thrown out the window. I hadn't gotten to ask about it at the hospital today, but it didn't make any sense for me to be acting differently, unbeknownst to myself, during the gaps in my memories. It had never happened before, not even once. Which is why that guru pic totally had to be a composite, even though it was a photograph of that very staking murder.
だったらさ、合成だって証拠を見つけちゃえばいいさ。あの画像解析しちゃおうよ。
But it made me sick, so I didn't want to look at it very much.
あの女を論破しちゃえば、タッキーはもう怯えることなく平穏な生活に戻れるんだよ。やるしかないっしょ。
I'm not so sure. But Takumi's going along with it. True enough, it's just as you say. You talked about it like I was the perpetrator of the staking, but that was out of the question. Because I myself had seen the perp's face, like I'd let you force guilt me for the crime on me. I sucked in a sharp breath and double-clicked the folder where the image should have been cached. Alright, let's take a closer look at this folder. Or then again, perhaps not. Once again, we're shifting to a very different location. It had been 3 days since Yasuji Ban had last entered the Shibuya Police Department's main conference room. So the police are still investigating the Nugent murders, which is fairly understandable. It would be bizarre if they weren't. But I'm going to call it an episode here, adventurers, and when we return, we'll see just how much progress the Shibuya Police Department has actually made concerning the New Gen investigations. As always, until next we meet.